There are a ton of incredible players in the NHL, and there are also a lot of absolutely terrible ones, and it's the latter we're going to be talking about today as I break down the 10 worst full-time NHL players in the league. These are guys who have played at least 30 games for their respective NHL teams this season and have just been absolute dog water, dragging their teams down, absolutely destroying their team's momentum anytime they go on the ice. And let's start at the very bottom with the 10th worst player in the NHL this year, Detroit Red Wings forward Marco Kasper. Despite the fact that he was billed as a powerful two-way forward, the Austrian center has largely left the offensive part of that two-way game behind. With only 3 goals and 6 points on the year so far, he is one of the worst offensive players in the entire NHL according to Hockey Stat and is actually kind of bad defensively too, so it's not even like he's outweighing that bad offensive production by just being a shutdown guy who can keep the opponents pinned in their own zone. Number 9 on the list is San Jose Sharks center Ty Dellandrea, and the Sharks have a lot of young, exciting forwards who are producing at a high level. Dellandrea, on the other hand, is just an unexploded firecracker at this point. Despite the fact that he's only 25, it feels like he's bounced around the NHL a ton and just has never found a way to translate those high IQ traits that he brought into the NHL. As it stands right now, he's a pretty poor defensive player with only 2 goals and 11 points on the season so far. And despite the fact that he's young, he does not figure to be a main building block of this exciting Sharks team. Coming in at number 8, we have Montreal Canadiens defenseman Arber Xhekaj, who I know Habs fans will say isn't really supposed to be out there to be a defensive stalwart or especially drive offensive production. But even though he's mainly out there to be an agitator and an enforcer, he is just a net negative every time he steps onto the ice. Of course, low offensive production is to be expected from a guy like him, but you would like to see his defensive metrics be outside of the bottom 5% of all defensemen in the NHL, and being just a possession black hole every time he steps onto the ice. At the unlucky number 7 slot, we have veteran Vancouver Canucks defenseman Tyler Myers. I was surprised that a guy like him at age 35 just doesn't have a whole lot left in the tank. And he's on a pretty terrible Vancouver Canucks team to boot, so it's not like he's getting any support from his teammates. Can't exactly say that he's dragging down the whole core, but he's certainly the worst of the bunch, and that is a very damning statement for him. 6th on the list is another enforcer. It is veteran Ryan Reaves of the San Jose Sharks. Like Arber Xhekaj, we're not expecting a whole lot from Reaves when it comes to his offensive production or even his defensive acumen. He's even more than Xhekaj out there just to be a pest and a fighter. But still, there has to be some justification to put Ryan Reaves out on the ice other than just to fight. Otherwise, it's a waste of a roster spot. And the way that he plays when he is out there and he's not fighting is indicative of a guy who is just a waste of a roster spot. At number 5 on the worst players in the NHL right now, a true cautionary tale to never take a 1-year jump as a sign of a quick turnaround, and that's Dante Fabro of the Columbus Blue Jackets. The story was looking great last year when he moved on from the Nashville Predators to the Columbus Blue Jackets. It seemed like the change of scenery had completely revitalized his career, and he signed a 4-year extension in Columbus to boot. Now, just 1 year into that extension, things are looking very ugly for Fabro in Columbus, reading out as one of the worst defensemen in the NHL and adding basically no offense on the year, just 2 goals and 6 points. For a guy who's going to be making over $4 million for the next 4 years, including this one, just really a swift kick in the nuts for the Columbus Blue Jackets here. 4th worst player in the NHL right now is another guy who just signed a huge contract, and we all know who he was coming on this list. Trent Frederic of the Edmonton Oilers has been absolutely terrible. I mean, we all knew that his contract when he signed it in the offseason was not going to age well, but oh boy, we didn't think it would end up being this bad until way later in the contract. Offensively, Frederic has been a complete non-factor with just 2 goals and 3 points on the year. And even though he's not completely terrible defensively, for the amount that he's getting paid, it is just a brutal look for the Oilers. At spot number 3, St. Louis Blues defenseman Tyler Tucker. A pretty little known 25-year-old defenseman for the St. Louis Blues who is billed as mostly a stay-at-home guy, but the way he is playing, St. Louis Blues fans might want him to stay at home, like permanently. Despite the fact that he's been a bit of a surprise with a 2-goal, 8-point season so far, he is literally in the bottom 1% of all defensemen in defensive metrics. Now, the second worst player in the NHL this season is on the New Jersey Devils. It's forward Luke Glendening. He's been kind of a journeyman bottom sixer for a while. The 36-year-old's never been an offensive dynamo. His career high in goals is 12 with Detroit, but he doesn't have a single goal this year, halfway through the season, and only 4 points. And considering he's still an incredibly substandard defensive forward, he is just not a guy who's providing a lot to the New Jersey Devils when he gets a sweater every night. He is not the worst player in the NHL this year. That honor belongs to St. Louis Blues defenseman Logan Mailloux. He, of course, made news in the offseason as part of a one-for-one prospect swap with the Montreal Canadiens. The Blues acquired him in exchange for Zach Bolduc, and even if Bolduc had gotten injured in training camp and never played a game, he would have a way better positive impact for the Canadiens than Mailloux is having for the Blues. He is literally the worst defenseman in the NHL. There's nobody who comes even close. There's not a single metrics that Hockey Stat Card tracks in which he is outside of the bottom 50th percentile, and in terms of defensive score, he is literally dead last. And offensively, thank God he's at least scored a goal this year. Otherwise, it would look like even more of a disaster. Zach Bolduc's been pretty good for Montreal, which just adds insult to St. Louis Blues fans who have to watch the guy they got back for him play like the absolute worst player in the NHL.